Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are with the Witsken podcast and Midwest Pickleball Club, and I'm Senior Pro Rick Witsken.
I'm Don Helfert, recreational player.
And we are super excited to achieve a lot with a series of podcasts that are going to give you guys educational opportunities on the sport, what's latest occurrences in the game, different types of techniques, discussing my professional play, my teaching strategies. We have some instructional videos as well. I find it very unique in that an amateur player like Don, who has a lot of savvy business experience, we are going to evolve this podcast. And today we're tailoring it to what you want because we have a list of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. We really don't know where this is going to go, so we're excited to get more questions from you. Like Rick said, I'm a relatively new recreational player, but like most of you, I'm in love with pickleball, and I'm glad that I had a chance to meet Rick and learn a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes that a rec player like me normally couldn't see, and just very excited to share those things with all of you.
There's no doubt that there's a lot going on, the latest between the two tours, and certainly the MLP and the Vibe team competition. You talk about the HP Tour, and you have the UTR connection, which is kind of more of a tennis connection. It's really hot, and it's now. And if you have watched me play, Witsken is my brand as a player, and I'm pretty gregarious. I like to be out there with my energy, and I will do the same on this podcast, baby. So let's get into it. We got some questions. I'd love to start firing away. And what do you think would be the best question to start with, Don?
The best question to start with? Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the Midwest Pickleball Club and what our thoughts and plans are there. Maybe a little bit more about the Witsken podcast, and maybe we can dive into some of the USAP news. Like you mentioned, UTPR. I'm pretty interested to understand what's going to happen with that change versus Duper and APP. So excited to hear about that. But why don't you talk a little bit about Midwest Pickleball Club and what our thoughts there and what we want to accomplish?
Yeah, Midwest Pickleball Club is a group of people here in Indianapolis that really want to see the sport grow in a big way. We obviously have some instructional videos that are going to be a key component of my professional instruction. But that being said, we really want to be involved in the component of teaching on location at certain sites. We also want to grow the awareness. There's so many things in pickleball that can be confusing, whether it's using the software to enter a tournament, or maybe it's, the two different tours and who you want to watch where, and, the different formats. Formats are constantly changing. So in one sense, I think the Midwest Pickleball Club can absolutely evolve into clarification in a lot of capacities, having a pro that wants to do that along with the amateur, so we get it from both angles. That makes a lot of sense. Plus, there's some really breaking news that we will be continuing to share with you that I feel like I will be privy to that maybe our audience hasn't heard before.
That's great. From my part, I've seen a lot of division in the pickleball world, surprisingly, as an ambassador with USAP, and just moving into the business aspect of pickleball. And we really wanted to create a force to unite rather than divide. I feel like the pickleball world is big enough, the business side of the pickleball world is big enough for everybody to get in. And, the old saying that a rising tide raises all boats. And so just to be cooperative with all the local clubs and clubs around the country and not competitive with them. And for instance, we plan to have a free membership for our members and some benefits, hopefully discounts with people. And, we're going to run some tournaments and let people have a little break on that too. But ultimately the idea is to bring people together rather than to divide into little groups and try to break down the walls that I see rising up in the pickleball world before they even really get to be a big thing, So it's pretty interesting to me as an amateur player, just the things I've learned in the last year. I started really playing in July of 2022, and I'm just witnessing all the different groups and organizations around the world and what's happening with the International Pickleball and the World Pickleball Federations, foundations, and that sort of thing. So I love the fact that you've been able to share the things you can share with me. I know there's some things that you can't share, but I'm actually kind of curious about the whole new thing with the APP and UTPR. I mean, from everyone I've heard, like I hypothetically have a Duper rating, I don't know. I played in one tournament, but most of the people I play with seem to know their rating, right? But I mean, they play with their friends. So you get 40 or 60 people in a group, and suddenly this person thinks they're a 3 and this person, what do you think that's going to mean for the sport of pickleball?
Well, obviously, the necessary significance of knowing one's rating and having benchmarks in matches against computer-generated ratings, it's really how the tennis world works, right? I mean, I'm from the tennis world. I've been coaching now tennis for over 30 years and coaching pickleball for over 13 years. And so, you knew this was coming down the pike of what would be the best rating system. And quite frankly, UTR is an obsession of junior tennis ranking that I've seen a lot of kids concern themselves with, and it really helps coaches identify which players they may want to recruit through tennis. I've got a daughter who's a senior in high school. I know her UTR, and I know coaches use that as a tool. But more importantly, the APP is going to roll out their designation of what UTR is. I can't answer that exactly right this second. I certainly know Duper has the ability for players to play each other, consider it a counted rec play game, issuing their scores through the computer, and then it generates based on fair play. And clearly for me as a pro, I absolutely know what my Duper rating is. And to be honest, I think it's pretty darn accurate with the pros. I cannot speak for that amongst the amateur players because pros aren't going to be playing rec play and entering their scores saying this is a legitimate game. A lot of times pros don't play to win the game. Mm-hmm. You play to win the game. No, we don't. Sometimes we play to improve a certain skill. In fact, I can remember even playing number 1 in the world, Todd Witsken, when he was number 1 in the world professionally in doubles and 42 in singles, and I beat him. I was 18, 19 years old, and I beat him because he was working on certain shots. I didn't think I was better than him. He was working on certain shots. So for the pros, I think it's a little different. But listen, we are just after Thanksgiving, and I just want to say thank you, pickleball. You've done a lot for me. You've done a lot for Don. You brought us together, and we've nurtured a nice friendship out of this. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, as I think about my whirlwind of 2022, where I played more matches than any professional or pro senior on the circuit, it was so many amazing relationships that I got to connect with. People's homes I stayed at. It was new senior pros that I got to meet, new young up-and-coming pros that I connected with, tournament directors, staff, referees. I really love what the game has done. And, yes, I come from a tennis background, but this is poignant. And like you said just a minute ago, seeing that cohesion of working together, well, you did kind of see that a little bit with MLP and Vibe connecting with a league format that had two entities that were going to be working against each other coming together. So I'm glad to see that. I think when I read a little bit on the forum, I think the harshness of certain tones maybe need to dial it back, realizing we're still evolving as a sport. And I've seen it from all sides because I've been the AVP and the Open Tournament Director with my wife. And I've also been a professional player. And I run camps and I run clinics and introduction to pickleball classes. I'm not above teaching any level. So I feel like I kind of see it from all angles. And I'm just really happy that more and more key people come into the game that can help us pickleball players get better answers and become more significant. So we seem more intelligent and well-positioned to all the corporate people and then also the people that want to jump into our sport. That's super important. So thank you, pickleball. After Thanksgiving, I was through Thanksgiving just thinking about how much pickleball has really helped my world, helped my life. And thank goodness I have a supportive family for all of the road trips I've had to take.
Yeah, definitely. Bridget's really been a supportive spouse to you. I know you have had a great year, though. Congratulations on the national gold. And I know at the end of December, once the points all tally up, I expect you're going to be the #1 senior pro male in the country. I think that's a big deal. How does it make you feel?
having goals is super important. And I didn't really think 2 years ago when senior pro was going to be what I was aging into after I'd already played 8 years of pro. I didn't think that this would be an initiative I had. But to the credit of both the APP and the PPA Tour, where there was money involved in senior pros, there were more on the APP side, the live streams, they committed to that directive and initiative. That was super appreciative to build my brand. And my goal was, to be honest, my number one goal for this year, 2022, was to be the best player when you combine singles, doubles, and mixed doubles. On the APP Tour, there's a tour standings list. And yes, I played a lot of tournaments, not quite as few as a few others ranked high, but I played a ton. And I feel like I've achieved my goal with the combination of singles, doubles, and mixed. Some of the top players on the senior pro tour are my really good friends. And luckily, we're old enough and appreciative enough that we have a pro sport to play, that there's a lot of respect. I mean, when you think about top guys I played, on the doubles end, when you talk about, Dane Gingrich and Dave Weinbach and John Sperling and Scotty Crandall and you're we've played so many times. And I'm sure I'm forgetting people, Dan Granat, Scott Moore. But at the same time, in singles, we have people like Matthias Johansson and Paul Olin. And, I think those two, along with Mirch and I, are probably the top 4 singles players, or definitely top 4 singles players this year. So the battles I've had with them, in the mixed doubles, I've just been so blessed to have Beth Bellamy, who's the number one woman in the world, and she's just so savvy in the relationship we evolved. Literally, that relationship started out of a friendship that my brother Todd Witsken had when he was at University of Southern California, USC, and Beth was there. And then Beth's husband Steve went to IU and was kind of an Indiana guy. He was older than me, but I knew of Steve Bellamy, and I kind of heard of her. And then all of a sudden, I just called Beth out of the blue a year and a half ago, because we were playing the SoCal Open and didn't have mixed partners. Like, hey, do you want to play 2 tennis people? She said, sure. We go on, we win the winners bracket and beat every top player. Like, wow. So to know that you have a partner that you can develop with, I've won 8 different partners I won tournaments with in 2022 on the men's side. Wow. So I really, that's probably the thing I'm most proud of. Like, I reached the goal of the number one spot on APP Tour through singles, doubles, and mixed. But winning with all those different male partners, like, I didn't know at the beginning of the year, was it going to be singles or mixed doubles or men's doubles that was going to be my best category. And quite frankly, depending on what part of the year it was, I would have said it was singles or it was mixed or it was men's. So, but at the end of the day, I just came fresh off the Nationals victory with Bellamy, and that was an incredible story in itself, because we literally had a decision to make at 8 a.m. when our bracket started at 9:30 a.m. And at 8 a.m. we weren't playing because she had a lot of physical ailments. We both were burnt out and okay with not playing. And she called me back after the 8 a.m. and us saying, hey, call turn director, let's pull out. So she said, hey, let's give it a try. And if Beth says, let's give it a try, I say, okay, you want me to jump? How high? You want me to take 9%? I can do that. So in that weird kind of twist of fate, we went from not entering the tournament to continuing our entrance into winning the whole thing. And it was just almost magical. And it was a really cool way to finish the year. I got one more tournament in Mesa. I'm not playing mixed because I had to pull out of that, but I'm playing men's doubles and singles, and then we'll have the shakeout of the points, and it should have me at number one based on I have no points to fall off, and I'm in first place right now.
All right. Well, I think, just having watched, I don't think anybody would have known that Beth was feeling sick. She crushed it. And honestly, I could watch Dane play with you all day.
All day. Oh, yeah. So Dane and I, we kind of have a pepper relationship. We tease each other about, have either of us broken into the top 15 in men's pro seniors. And, sometimes when we get into our fun banter online, people are you guys friends? Are you good? Heck yes, we're friends. We're brothers. And, it's been fun playing the tournaments with Dane. And he's such a analytical guy when it comes to coaching. Quite frankly, I am too, but people don't realize it because I'm not putting it out there all over social media. Dana's the guru of senior pro social media audience, and obviously he teaches a ton. I teach some, but I don't teach nearly as much as him. But nothing but respect between him and I, and whether he wins or I win, it doesn't matter. We'll go to dinner with each other, and that's honestly what it should be. And I think the pro seniors really are starting to get personalities, and because of thanks to the live stream, I have to give AP a ton of credit because they gave us a bunch of visibility. That really has created a desire. We had Dane and I and Beth and Jen Dawson had 4,000 views on one point 3 days after we played nationals.
Wow.
And now I think it's up to 10,000 views.
Wow.
So, there's obviously that kind of discussion of senior pros versus open pros. And I think there's major relevance on both sides, but I can't be more appreciative than the friendships that evolve at the highest level, because competing is only as fun as, the relationships that you have off the court. I really believe that.
That's really neat to hear. I had a chance to throw out a little primer to let people know we were talking today, and on the forums on Facebook and some other spots. And a fellow named David Tabb actually asked that question. He said it feels like the senior pros have a lot of camaraderie, and he wanted to know if that was true, and if it's true, why he thought so. So great to hear that. But it just seems like it does seem like people are a lot of fun, and you have a good relationship with them. And it's fun to watch you all play off of each other. And I know there was a time, I forget who you were playing with, but you both started making a lot of noise. There was a fellow David Randall, who said, "Why all the noise?" I'm like, "It was great." They're like, "Oh, back and forth," So.
Well, let me go back to the question of Mr. Tabb.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so David Tabb was asking about the camaraderie of the pro seniors, and I would say that we kind of feel like we're all in this together, right? We've seen our tide rise and drop based on value given by the different tours, and we know we have value. We know we have fan bases. Most of us are coaches that have followings that want to see us. And quite frankly, I think we've all felt like we need to have a united front, because we're really posturing for a disposition in the pro pickleball world that's valued. We know we're valued. We have students all the time tell us, hey, we're a senior. We are not really that interested in watching two 19-year-olds play for the 20th time in a row. We want to watch seniors and see what we can maybe aspire to be. And obviously, most pickleball players are well over the age of 40 and 50. Mm-hmm. So I think that helps. But to answer David's question, the senior pros are mature. We know to act emphatically on the court and put on a show at times. I definitely consider myself a showman. And that being said, I'm currently in talks with some senior pros right now about evolving something that's going to blow out of the water what currently is being offered for the enjoyment of senior pro. So
what can you tell us about?
Not much, but I can tell you that it's not in competition with either tours or the leagues, but at the same time, it's going to put out there front and center the top players with other tier players, and it's just going to be incredible because you all know by the end of the year exactly what I'm referring to. So I'm super stoked for that. To go kind of into the next question, which was the noise, and what was the gentleman's name?
David Randall.
David Randall. So to answer his question, I certainly grunt. I'm not the only one that grunts on the tour. In fact, there's plenty of grunters out there. See my match with Dave Weinbach. Dane grunts at times, and he and I kind of mimic each other's grunts. But I think it's a tennis thing. I know it's a tennis thing. When we grew up playing tennis and exhaling with that heavy racket, heavy ball, it just kind of evolved from tennis. And I think it's a way to maybe manage pressure where you don't bottle it up. I certainly respect my opponents and never would do anything intentionally to distract them. Quite frankly, I've had a number of senior pros come up to me this year and say, Rick, I really appreciate the energy you bring to the game. I know you're a little loud, but you look like you're always having fun and you engage the crowd, and that's who I am. So, I've seen a couple scuttlebutt messages on the forum. Oh, he's too loud, he grunts too much, whatever. But it's in good fun. I love my senior pro brothers and sisters, and they know that.
Good. You kind of mentioned something about Todd earlier, your brother Todd Witsken, and I know there's a story that I felt was a great story about Todd and the name Ripskin. When you first told it to me, I really would love for you to share that with everybody if you're willing.
Certainly have to. It's something I'm really proud of. So, and I got to give credit to my wife who helped come up with the name. But as you see here, Ripskin, the RIP is rest in peace for Todd Witsken. He was 7 years older than me. And then obviously my last name is Witsken. So Ripskin, it's a combination of those words and names. But at the same time, the eagle that's involved in the logo here, when Todd was diagnosed in 1997 with a brain tumor, it was a phase 4 glioblastoma multiforme. So he was given 6 months to live. This is a guy that not only was my brother, but he was the brother of 6 other siblings in addition to myself. He's a loving dad of 4 children. He just had his 4th child. She was a baby. And then he was number 1 in the world in professional tennis doubles and ranked 42 in the world in singles. He had wins over John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors. He played Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras. But anyway, more importantly, he had the fight of his life fighting a brain tumor. So, in fact, it's weird that we're talking about this right now because I literally just saw through college basketball, Jimmy V Foundation, Jimmy Valvano. I can remember when Todd was in the family room when he was, in his hospital bed in his home, and he was watching the Jimmy Valvano speech. I think it was ESPN, the ESPYs, and Jimmy Valvano would say, "Never give up, never give up." Todd's like, "Yeah," and Todd couldn't even speak that well, and he had a patch over his eye. But I remember Valvano's speech was very emphatic into Todd's emotional state, being somebody that was really dying of cancer at that time. So it's interesting we're talking about it. But regardless, the last trip Todd and I took with brothers and a couple of his really close friends was out in Yellowstone in the Pacific Northwest. We went to a bed and breakfast for a week. And it was just incredible how these activities, the whitewater rafting and the horseback riding and the fly fishing, and wherever we went, whatever we did, there was a bald eagle that would follow us around. And so this bald eagle here is really emblematic of the animal that kind of was always over Todd's being on his last trip. So needless to say, Eagle's Wings was the song at his funeral, and there's really a connection there. Ironically, I live in Zionsville, and their mascot's the Eagles, but that's not the reason. And Todd lived in Zionsville too. In fact, I probably moved to Zionsville because Todd had planted himself on 20 acres in Zionsville, and he was just kind of my role model idol. So when people see me kind of touch my chest and point out, it's just because like he's there for me in the spiritual way.
Wow, that's pretty cool. How I got to imagine he helped you in your early tennis career and in the evolution of a tennis player to a pickleball player. What did that look like?
Yeah, so Todd was just more of, since he was 7 years older than me, I think it was more about watching what he was achieving and being so proud that I was related to him, and then God giving the Witsken family a lot of talent and me wanting to nurture that talent. I'd be lying if I said that it was easy being his brother and following in his footsteps. I was compared to him all the time. And while I was ranked number 1 in the country in college tennis and doubles, we were seeded number 1, and I was playing at Alabama, 2-time All-American, I still feel like Todd was number 1 in the country in the 12s, and the 14s, and the 16s, and the 18s. He played for USC, which was a top 2 in the country school. He was 1 and 2, so he was always a little better than me. But at the end of the day, we got to play some pro doubles tournaments together. So that was really fun. I played with him in Winnetka, Illinois, in a challenger. He asked me the day of the first round, he said, "Rick, how far do you think we can get?" And mind you, he was 27 years old and I was 20. I was in college and he was ranked top 20 in the world at that time. I said to Tom, "I think we can get to the finals." He looked at me like, "Okay, let's do it." And I'll be darned if we didn't go through that pro draw. And I hadn't won a pro match before. And we won 4 matches and got to the finals and lost in 3 sets. So I'm still kicking myself for not saying, "We're going to win the tournament." So we got to the finals, but still, that was we beat guys like Byron Black and Roy Steppe and Richard Matashevsky. I remember like it was yesterday because that was one of just the coolest the events that I ever had with Tom, was being on the court with him. And we just kind of were like fire and ice that weekend. So
that's a great experience.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I am kind of curious, and I've never really asked you this, about your evolution from tennis to pickleball. I know if you look around the pickleball world out in LA, tennis players are getting very frustrated because pickleball players are getting onto their courts. So they were putting up bumper stickers, go away pickleball players, which was really the best press pickleball could have ever gotten because people were saying, what is pickleball? So I'm curious, how did you evolve from, potentially top tennis player in the world? How did you make the move into tennis, and where do you see tennis and pickleball evolving together, and like the players getting along, not getting along? What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, I think that kind of revolves around one of the questions that somebody asked online. And the answer to that question is, first of all, my tennis playing days were pretty much over when I was teaching, and in my 40s, and pickleball became just a little blip of a radar on the screen. And I played it with my good friend and coworker, John Kristen. I played it in singles. I'm like, I kind of like this because I wasn't liking singles in tennis anymore due to being 40 years old and just such a physical grind. I still was playing doubles and mixed doubles in tennis, but my enjoyment for singles, which is really rare. I think most people don't play pickleball and say, I love it because I was exposed to singles. I've not heard anybody say that actually, but that's how I evolved is, this is a good singles game. I could half the court. I like the touch aspect and the maneuvering of the ball, and I get a long wingspan. Okay, let's do this. I was a serve volleyer in tennis, so obviously returning and coming in at pickleball, singles, super huge. That's kind of how it evolved. But I really enjoy feeling like I'm taking this sport when it's at its infant stages. And boy, did I take a lot of darts from my tennis friends. I really did.
Really?
And I'm not sad about that. I certainly think now, if they look back on our conversation 10 years ago, like, whoa, you must have been on to something. But I'm not saying that out of spite, because the truth is that I've tried to mesh tennis and pickleball together. I think the synergy makes most sense. When I hear ATP and the UTR, Universal Tennis and Rating System, coming out in a merger, that makes me happy, right? And the tennis world was kind of split, I think even 4 or 5 years ago on pickleball versus tennis. And every day I'm seeing it come around. You get a lot of pro tennis players, former pro tennis players, whether it's, Sam Querrey is now, he just retired tennis. He's getting into pro pickleball now. He's going to be really good, obviously. John Isner, he's played in multiple videos in Dallas with some of my pro friends there. So, you think about some of the guys that are 200, 300, 400 in the world, pro tennis, have been there a long time. Well, the live streaming and the money coming into pickleball is paying out better than tennis. And so you're getting a lot of people jumping over into this world. So I think that there's some natural synergies, and there's obviously some scenarios where tennis needs to stay tennis, pickleball needs to stay pickleball. But I helped build a club, and I can remember being in board meetings where they looked at me like I was crazy trying to evolve pickleball on this tennis club. Like, well, let's do it when people aren't playing tennis. So that was hurtful to not have them understand the value of this. I've seen this game change lives. People that don't want to exercise start wanting to exercise because they love it. I've seen people with cancer say this is their only lifeblood for living and fighting. Like, okay, tennis can do that, but pickleball can do it better because it's an easier game to play. You can pick it up and be decent at it pretty much right away if you have decent coach or instruction in that little intro clinic. And that, my heart moves to that. I coach a middle school team. I believe the only middle school team in America. I put my money into this team. Why? So I could tell everybody about it? No. I did it because I knew there were kids out there that weren't super athletic, that didn't really have a sports home. And now They play pickleball, they love it, and my stepson is completely one of those kids.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to try and be on the basketball team or the football team, but he's got ability, and he likes pickleball. He's playing with his friends. Boom, we had 20 boys on our middle school pickleball team this fall. Like, that's pretty cool. So the emergence of seeing it in the college level, the high school level, and middle school level, that's really important to me as well.
Yeah, I'd love to help facilitate that too. That's one of the things we talked about with Midwest Pickleball Club. How are we part of that youth initiative sort of thing? I know I love tennis, but I'm older, I'm injured, don't have the wheels that I used to have, so it's more difficult for me to play. And pickleball is an easier sport to play, so I'm glad to hear you say that. I know when Sam Query came out, he said I'll probably be a top 10 player, and people are like, oh, how arrogant. But then you find out Sam Query's been playing pickleball for 6 or 7 years now. He didn't just decide I'm a pro, So, LeBron James has a pickleball court. Everybody's like, what is LeBron doing buying a team? Well, the guy's probably known about the sport longer than I have. So there are a lot of people out there like that. I think, from my point of view, there are more people who are pro tennis, pro as in pro con, pro tennis and pickleball versus the outliers that are, only tennis, only pickleball. And it's nice to see that. I mean, it's all, for me at least, it's about having fun recreationally. And so I haven't really encountered anybody in my recreational play who hates pickleball from the tennis side. So I think it's a smaller percent of people. But I do think it's important for us to watch the evolution. One of the things I think is going to be a giant predictor of how the sport grows is infrastructure. I know courts are springing up all over the place, right? I hear every day, well, I put one in my barn. I talked to a buddy today. He's like, yeah, I'm going over to the corporate office. They put a pickleball court. I got to go find out what pickleball court is. Like, wow, that's pretty cool, right? But eventually, like, we're going to have more public facilities and, and it can't just be people who can afford to do it, right? There are a lot of kids out there that can't necessarily afford to buy a $100 or $200 paddle. So how do we help those? How do we build the infrastructure of new courts for people to play that are pickleball only? Like, I'm pretty excited about Kelly Bodner's Pickle and Pen that's coming along. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, I believe, 8 courts and around September of 2023. Well, super excited to have a nice indoor facility.
Yeah, for sure. And she's jumping in first, right?
Yeah,
you're in Indiana.
She's both feet in. I mean, you can tell when you talk to her, you can tell she's super committed to, not just her own thing, but to helping grow the sport around the state, around the country. And
her intentions are pure. Like, she's not saying, oh, I need to make a ton of money.
No.
That's not her motivation. And her and her husband, Steve, I'm so proud to be in the city where they're investing in a very nice facility. It's going to cost a lot of money. Quite frankly, it's going to be a tough nut to reach on a monthly basis to pay for that. But I'm going to help them. Ripson's going to help them. Midwest Pickleball is going to help them because we're all in this together. But I think in addition to that, you were saying people that can't afford it. Well, the reality is, I literally at a public school had courts painted, my tennis courts where I coached the middle school tennis team, which I still do, had lines put on the tennis courts, and it was so easy. Okay, you buy the $90 nets and you get to the school and the kids play, and it's really easy and it's not hard to get paddles in their hands and portable nets. And every school that has tennis courts can be an instant pickleball facility as well. I want to give a shout out to Mount Vernon High School, which is where we ran the Indy Open pickleball tournament, my wife and I, this past year, because they have 6 dedicated pickleball courts right next to their 12 tennis courts. Like, that's unheard of to have a public school invest in pickleball courts dedicated, as well as, obviously the tennis facility. So I want to give them a huge, huge shout out. But, at the end of the day, tennis and pickleball have been polarized for, such a far distance 5 years ago. Now I feel like there's a lot of synergies and motivations. I saw my good friend Mickey Ball at the Nationals, and he was on my U.S. Team where we played for Team USA over in Australia, actually New Zealand, and he's helping merge that relationship between tennis and pickleball. So a lot of neat things coming down the pipeline. I'm excited for the synergistic waves, and I'll be right there at the forefront trying to blend these two sports.
I'll be right there with you. And if you have a facility out there and you want to get the word out, feel free to join our Facebook channel and get the word out about tournaments and leagues and things like that. That's one of the places where I really would love to see an APP change. By the way, one of my fellow ambassadors, whose name escapes me at the moment, said something that I was thinking too. Leagues, like one of the things USTA did well was their league play and their rating system. The first time I ever played in a league, I had to go meet with a pro for a half an hour and get a rating from that local pro who'd been calibrated. I got my USTA rating, and now I could go play in the league. And I would love to see APP do something like that, or maybe a more organized national league of some kind that could help with the rating system. I don't know if that's something you and your senior pro team could help with, but I think that'd be
you've already played in one of my leagues, which is on Fridays, and I think that it can be a league that's structured at the national level. But I love our league that we have on Fridays. We have from 8 to 10 in the morning on Fridays, then 10 to 12, and then 12 to 2. We have 16 to 18 players playing on 4 courts, and we're, quite frankly, we have a waiting list, and the number of courts we have, which is 4 to dedicate to that league, we've outgrown it. So thank goodness a facility like Pickleball Penn is coming next year, because I would like to move that league over into her facility so we can accommodate more players. So, my good friend Michael Chen up in Connecticut, I know he did a league in Connecticut, and it kind of grew like wildfire, and he was a kind of duper related league, and they actually won or got the first prize for duper facility of the month for their league. So whether you do it kind of more locally or you look to a body like the USAPA or duper or even pro seniors to implement that, it's happening. It's going to continue to grow.
What did he do that made the league so successful? I know there are a lot of people out there that fire up a league, or let's play a series of 8. What can they do to make something like that successful?
Well, he found a facility. It's not easy to find facilities and charge not a large amount for league play for indoor pickleball. Now, outdoors, that's not so hard. But the indoors, that's the component. When you live in Indiana like we do, or you live in Connecticut, you're talking about 6 months out of the year, you have to have indoor relevance. And it's hard for clubs to justify making only XYZ money on league matches when that court time becomes so valuable.
No, that's true. I mean, CSW up in Pendleton has a pretty nice facility. It's primarily tennis, but they were nice enough to let us film some videos there. I'm just really excited to see the infrastructure grow. Like the more places to play, the more access for more people. It's going to be pretty awesome. So I am kind of curious. You mentioned being 40 and trying to play professional tennis. Some people might call that a failure, right? And I'm a big believer that the only time you really fail is when you stop moving forward, right? We all fall down, we get back up. But with that in mind, would you say there are any failures in your past that have led you to be motivated to pursue the sport of pickleball, or what kind of led you there in that respect?
Yeah, I would say there's probably a couple of things. I don't know if this is a total failure, but I know when I was pursuing pro tennis at age 23, my brother Todd Witsken had already retired off the tour, offered me a job, and I wanted to consider that. And I ended up taking the job with him and deciding not to pursue the professional tennis route. So that really continued to leave a fire in me that needed to be cultivated at some point. And pro pickleball came around and was that for me. But additionally, I remember losing in a match at the Nationals in tennis at 18s. We had 2 match points, and if we had won, Steve Campbell and I would have gone on to play in the U.S. Open main draw. And we lost those 2 match points. We lost the match. And I really, that hurt me to lose that match, to be 1 point away from playing in the main draw U.S. Open. And the team we lost to, then they actually won the first round of the U.S. Open. So, man, right there. But then I could also honestly say helping with a few other guys develop a club, an indoor facility. And to me, tennis and pickleball could be connected. And that facility broke down for reasons I can't mention. But the disdain for pickleball was very motivating to me. When I had to sit in a room and hear people snub their nose or brush off the sport, that became very motivational for me. And so, growing the sport was really, really important to me at that point in time. And then I can tell you one thing, when I was 49 years old, which of course I have the worst birthday for pro seniors, my birthday's in January. So here, my buddy Dave Weinbach's playing a full year, and we're like a month and a half apart, but he's playing a full year before I am. I'm like, we're like barely a month apart. Anyway, but that wasn't like super motivating. What was motivational was that there was a forum chat about, okay, who are the best senior pros? And I, just played Tyson McGuffin in the quarterfinals of the US Open, and I had wins over, so many top players in my 48, 49 years old. And, people knew I was coming to pro seniors, and nobody listed my name in this forum. I'm like, well, I took a screenshot of that. I printed that out. You better believe that not once was my name mentioned as a potential pro senior top player. There was also I remember an APP podcast actually, and had a couple panelists, and they were discussing who the top players were. And I was kind of like an honorable mention. I'm like, this motivates me. And it's funny as I look back on it, nobody am I mad at, but just to churn that crank a little bit more is a good thing. And if you watch that, Michael Jordan's my favorite athlete of all time. So The Last Dance was amazing. And just to see a psychology that somebody that didn't draft him 15 years later, he'd be walking past him in a restaurant and not say hi and play this guy's team the next day. And remember, he wasn't drafted by them, score 50 points. Like those little things to kind of keep those working in your brain. Yeah, I have that printed out. So that's not really a failure, but to be kind of overlooked. Yeah, that has pumped me up. So I've had some failures and then some snubs that I think motivated me a lot this year.
Yeah, in a way, that's a good thing, right? I love that. So I think we've all experienced that. If we've been successful at something, like somebody who said, you can't do this, and I'm going to do this. It's good. You mentioned Tyson McGuffin. I watched a little bit of his play the other day. He's kind of an exciting player to watch. Who are some of the maybe younger up-and-coming pros that you think are the future of the sport? And really kind of a corollary to that, do we really know who the future of the sport is, yet the sport's so new, relatively speaking?
Yeah, well, that's the irony of these tours and locking up players and appearance fees, that it's an ever-changing guard, if you will, at the top. I mean, I'm not going to mention names, but there are people that were, the second coming of Jesus that now aren't meddling. And that's not to be critical. It's just, it's the nature of the sport and the nature of athleticism. And obviously, having played pro tennis gave me a leg up on some of my senior pro brothers and sisters I play against. And I think coming from a pro tennis background of 20-year-olds that are now jumping over into pickleball, they do have a leg up on players that didn't play high-level tennis. There's quite frankly, there haven't been that many super high-level pro tennis players that have jumped over yet. Now, on the pro senior women's side, it's super impressive. My word, you look at my partner, Beth Bellamy, and you look at Jen Dawson, and you look at Gigi Fernandez, who won all the Grand Slams, and you look at Natalie Harriman and Angela Leitier. These women were incredible pro tennis players, and that's why they really raised the level of senior women tennis now in the pickleball. That's really palpable. But I think that, I can't even tell you, it wouldn't be fair for me to say, hey, I will say one thing is I believe this was probably his first tournament, when I saw Federico Stocksrud play singles in Plantation in Florida last year, I do have an eye for talent. And that guy is going to be sick and amazing, and he's doing really well. I will also say that, Julian Arnold, he's probably even maybe a little better height version of me because he's like half my age, but his andiamo and his talking to the crowd, I like it. I do. And it probably rubs some people the wrong way, as long as he's not a cheater, as long as he's a good person. And that's what to me is really important. You can capture that energy and playing to the crowd and be a fair player, then that's really good for the game. And I like watching him. So, on the women's side, I'm playing U.S. Open with Anna Bright next year in the split age, which I really like those events. I got to play with Dylan Frazier at Nationals, and we got fourth, and love playing with him. And so seeing these young pros side by side on the court, it's the one time when I play with Dylan, it's the closest feeling I've had playing doubles next to what it was like to play with Todd Witsken. I literally was playing against Dave Weinbach and Wes Gabrielson this year. We were in an epic close match, and I just thought, man, Dylan is really good, and he's really comfortable to play with, and I really like this kid on the court and off the court. This almost feels like a brother, and so I remember feeling that mid-match. I was thinking that this feels a little like playing with Todd. So I didn't tell Dylan that, but I can tell him that if he's ever watched this podcast, that's the ultimate compliment, is being, in my world, being compared to Todd Witsken. Like, that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Well, you mentioned talent and having an eye for talent, and I think most of us realize there's a difference between being a super great player and being a super great coach. What are some of the things you think that make you a great coach? And when you talk about teaching new players, I know a lot of the questions we had online were, how do I improve? So maybe we'll get into some of those questions in a bit, but talk about what makes you a great coach.
Fair question. And I think that, when you look at the background of a coach, that's super important. It's one thing to take a camp because you have a name of somebody you saw play in a pro tournament, but being a great player does not make you a great coach, right? It helps. It definitely helps, but maybe this coach doesn't communicate well. Maybe they don't really know how to mold their mentality to an amateur or intermediate level. I would never teach a 3 or 3-5 certain tricks that I have when I play. There's a lot that I do that they could absolutely engage in this technique and be good for that. So to answer your question, I've been coaching for over 30 years. I started when I was 16 years old coaching tennis. So in effect, that is 34 years of coaching that I've had. So you can't supplement, or you just can't have a replacement for years spent on the court breaking down people's games and having an eye for the game, right? So I'm biased, but I think coaches that are a little older that play at a really high level are super valuable. Now, for my own talents, I think that, ultimately I've been coaching pickleball for 10, 11 years now, and I've run a number of camps, and I've really enjoyed the group factor of camps and seeing how to maybe merge and blend campers in their different levels versus the private lesson where I teach a lot at home. I don't teach a lot of private lessons on the road. I do more camps, but that's a whole different scenario. But I cannot wait in future podcasts to explain some of the principles in which I use and explain within coaching, because they're very different than what maybe some of these other coaches that have been out there on YouTube for years. And I very much connect with students based on their level and their abilities versus one size fits all.
Well, I think it's cool. I was lucky enough to be there when you were doing your first 10 videos for your online series that you're posting on YouTube. It's fun. I learned a lot, and there were a couple of other people there who thought it was great. And I think at this point, almost 100,000 people have seen an impression of that site, and close to 20,000 people have watched the videos, and they've only been up for a month. So I appreciate doing that. I think it's going to help a lot of people improve their game. As a recreational player, you a lot of times you end up in an open play situation. So maybe there are people out there who are 4-0, 4-5, and maybe there are people who are legitimately at 3-0 or even less than that. And so you can end up on a court together. So any way that someone can jump on YouTube and see something that's going to be helpful to them or useful to them, I think is just beneficial for the sport overall. So I appreciate you doing those.
Yeah, and one interjection here, just as a note for somebody that's watching, you'll hopefully benefit from this. And I was giving a semi-private lesson today to Mick and Jeff, and I was telling them that, guys, the main reason why I believe the amateur men are bangers is because they don't have the confidence to drop the ball properly. And yes, I do have a video out there on the proper techniques of dropping, but we literally worked on their drop in a competitive setting. And I think that it's not just a gender thing. Obviously, there's plenty of women that probably don't drop the ball because they don't feel confident in that. But practicing the drop over and over and over again with proper mechanics of in to out, down to up, body weight flow, that's way more important than playing rec game after rec game after rec game. So if you're out there and you're one of those people that are a little insecure of dropping the ball, so that's why you drive all the time, don't play another rec game until you get decent dropping, or that becomes a trick that you can pull out of the bag. So you need to have that. Don't just be a banger because you want to not screw up and hurt your partner's feelings. You really need to work on your drop till you get good at that, so you can do both the drop and the drive.
Well, I'm kind of curious, I mentioned that I had some injuries and things like that, and oftentimes it's my own fault. I get out and I arrive at the court and someone goes, "Come on, jump on." It's like, well, I haven't stretched yet. Come on. Okay. So I run out there. I don't warm up. What kind of warm-ups should you really do before you get onto a pickleball court? Any tips on that? And what are your thoughts on, clearly it's not the right thing to do, and I've stopped doing that, but what do you recommend people do before they get onto a court to play?
So this is a perfect example of there's two different ways to answer that, right? I can answer it from a professional perspective and playing a tournament, which a lot of players that I coach don't play tournaments, but I play singles, I play doubles, I play mixed doubles. So when I know my 225-pound body is about to embark upon 3 days, quite frankly, it's not been that enjoyable for me this year due to the physical and mental grind of being at each tournament site over and over and over again, and luckily medaling in most, that the electrolyte consumption prior to even the day of playing has been super important to me. Because as maybe some of you know, you get a little more predisposed to cramping as you get older. I never cramped when I was in my 30s and rarely cramped in my 40s, but now in my 50s playing a lot, I will cramp if I don't do the electrolyte consumption. Now, that being said, the stretching happens more in the hotel room and getting my body limber prior to playing that first match. As we know in the pickleball world of tournaments, you don't know when you're playing your match. Mm-hmm. You know when you need to show up, but it might be an hour and 40 minutes before you actually play. So stretching out at 7:45 to begin that 8 o'clock start, for what? You're just going to get cold again? So I think it's really important to watch the string of the waiting list and where you feel like you're going to be popping up, and then get into the active stretch mode 4 or 5 matches out before your match goes on. So that's tournament rec. Mm-hmm. But talking about rec play, clearly, getting to your site that you're going to play and not just jumping in to playing. I think that, you don't need to overdo it, but absolutely stretching out the calf and the hamstrings and the glutes and the quads. That's super important. I'll even, like I just showed, I'll stretch the shoulders and the wrists a little bit and work the neck out, but it doesn't have to be a lengthy thing. Mm-hmm. But I think we're all wise to at least give 15 minutes in advance of your play and your rack to get there and stretch out.
So a lot of times, at some of the local courts, like Meadowlark, for instance, there will be 40 or 45 people trying to get onto 4 courts. And so I've been there times and there's 25 minutes between, and you don't know exactly when one of those 4 courts is going to open up and now you're on, right? It might be 10 minutes, might be 5, it might be 25. What, any thoughts on how to stay, do you just keep running in place the whole time? What do you do to stay limber and loose and warmed up in a situation like that?
Yeah, I think little mini lunges back and forth when you feel like you're 5 or 10 minutes out. I certainly just feel like at that point it's more about my legs than anything. I want to feel like I'm hitting the ground running, and if there's a short ball that's a net court on the first point, I'm chasing that down, not scared I'm going to pop a gastroc or a hammy or whatnot. So clearly, little lunge stretches here and there. I think that's something I would do. It's not hard to do, to sway back and forth and bend and feel the muscles really getting loose.
Have you ever thought about making a series of workout videos? Like, I can see you dressed like Richard Simmons with the wig and you're doing whatever, but all teasing aside, have you ever thought about doing like a calisthenics video or something like that?
Well, I think people would watch it more if I did get the Richard Simmons hair and the wig, and I'm not opposed to that because I used to run a haunted house and a haunted trail, and I've been in a lot of costumes. So
it'll be fun.
I would totally do that. And yes, I have thought about it. And quite frankly, that's the beauty of pickleball for me right now, is this buffet and smorgasbord of the world in which we continue to evolve as pro players. Do I throw my name in the hat for MLP and vibe and play on a team? Do I go play? Actually, I know I'm 100% not playing nearly as many tournaments next year as I did this year. No way. Not fair to the wife and kids, but I'm going to be running more camps next year. So I still will be gone some where they can come with me. Obviously, the instructional videos, the podcasting, and then this special something I can't talk about yet that we're working on. It's going to be really, really neat. I feel blessed that there's so many different ways. And then, like you said earlier, the Pickleball on Penn facility, the beautiful 8 courts and the mezzanine and their new restaurant bar and the different vibes that we can create as a higher level pro in that club. I am super committed to helping Kelly Bonner and Steve Bonner make that successful.
Yeah, good. I think everybody in the community is. Everybody's come together. It was great to see those of you who came out to City Hall, and Kelly and Steve, and had to go and talk to the zoning board about one of their neighbors saying, "Hey, we're not sure if we want this to come in here." And I think over 30 people showed up to support them. It was pretty awesome to be in that room. It was really great when one of the people in the crowd answered "aye" when they asked for the vote. That was pretty hilarious moment. So it was good. But thank you all for coming out and showing us support just for the pickleball community around here. It's good to see that. So, Rick, I appreciate you answering all the questions. I've still got a few more questions that some of the people in the forums have asked that we can go through in a bit. But before I do that, is there anything else you want to tell the people out there about Midwest Pickleball, about Rick Witsken, this year, the past, the future? What are the thoughts? Anything you'd like to leave everybody with?
Well, I feel very honored to be getting a lot of requests for different activities, whether it's camps or lessons or even relationships business-wise. And I'm always open to those avenues. So if anybody there is interested in a top senior pro sponsor, I choose those wisely. I've had 2 main sponsors, Paddletech and Airfeet, because I really believe in the product. But people can reach out to me for sure and to discuss my evolution with them. I value my fitness. I value that I'm a big guy, and obviously top pro on AP Tour, like that all matters to me. But I also really want to reach a lot of people through my videos and through the podcast to make a huge dynamic effect. And I've had different news agencies here in Indianapolis and publications do articles, and some people have called me, I think Channel 13 called me the pioneer of pickleball in Indianapolis or Indiana. I don't need that for my just my resume, but if I could have the ability to touch as many, if not more, lives with this awesome sport in my geographic location, that makes me super happy. So I know what it does to change lives with adults, and I see what it does with kids. So being one of the important faces of pickleball, I'm happy to embrace that.
That's great. Well, I feel pretty lucky to have you in this area. When, back in April, when I first started hearing about pickleball and started thinking, this is, kind of a cool growth industry organization, and I started paying more attention and started playing a little bit. I heard your name out there, and then I realized, you're top pro on the senior tour, and I thought, wow, I'm just going to reach out and say hi to this guy. But he may not have time for just a regular guy, but you're super nice. And we went to lunch thinking, I thought we'd just have like a nice conversation. Turned out we really hit it off, and I'm glad, about the growing friendship that we have and the things that we're doing in the pickleball world together. So I feel like Indianapolis is lucky to have someone like you around here. And if people don't realize that, and just the resource in the pickleball world that you are, I think they're missing the boat. So if anybody needs anything in the pickleball world, like, reach out to Rick. You can reach out to the channel however you want to, but I know you're willing to help people and help people grow in that world as well. So,
So I appreciate the friendship that Cheryl and Paul McKinney, I met with Cheryl, didn't know Paul. This was after US Open and 3 years ago, and they are now mine and Bridget's best couple friends. And quite frankly, it's important in this first introductory podcast for people to know that Don and I literally just met through pickleball, through communication. And when I went to lunch with him, I had no preconceived notions other than I want to get to know this guy. You know, he obviously seems to love the game. We live in the same city. I'm a pro, he's an amateur. And sure, let's have a lunch. And then really upon that first lunch, I'm like, wow, this guy's got a great mind. He's somebody that I could totally see myself being connected to. And one thing that's super important to me is transparency. And I see a lot of BS out there in the pickleball world of, you know, pros playing the game to try and get from A to B. Well, you know, and I don't blame them for that. I'm 51 years old, and, you know, my next paycheck doesn't gyrate, you know, the need for that. And I'm not going to be playing any games with anybody. I see some pros being coy, not talking about a potential sponsor or league or tournament opportunity because they kind of don't want you to know about it. Well, I'm an open book. And that's what I loved about you, is that you seem transparent from the word go of our conversations and relationships. And there's a lot of insecure people out there. You're really bright. Sure, some people probably don't always love you because you're a really bright, smarter than them person. Maybe some people, you know, don't love me because I'm a decent athlete or whatnot, but I know the people that do know me, I have great relationships with. And that's what I really tend to focus on now. So thanks for the transparency, and that's what you can expect from this show. There's not going to be any coddling and kind of, you know, oh, you might offend somebody here or there. We're going to tell you how it is. And I know how it is because I just spent 30 plus weekends on the road seeing it all evolve.
Well, I'm excited to see behind the curtain. I'm sure everybody else is. So maybe that's a great place to wrap it up for today. We can answer more questions in future podcasts. Would you like to talk us out? Yeah,
so one thing is for sure, this show is going to have many, many, many guests that with the relationships that I've been lucky enough to forge. And we already have people like Ben Johns, people like Tyson McGuffin, the Brashas. We've already had plenty of people express their obligation to wanting to be on this show, which is super appreciative. So I feel very thankful for that. So just make sure you obviously tune in to the Witsken podcast and the Midwest Pickleball Club. We have YouTube videos, and I really want to see us continue to grow, and that's only going to be with your presence.
Well said. All right. See you next time.